So a few people that I play disc golf with have asked how I dye my discs. So instead of trying to explain it, I thought I'd just make a video. And there's tons of different ways to dye a disc. This is using clear glue and Prochem dye. Just a pretty simple little way to do it. And first thing, I always set up my area. I have this garbage bag here. I just lay down. I reuse the same one. You can tell it's got some battle scars on it. Um, but the thing is, once the dye touches anything, whether it be your clothes, your skin, your countertop, it's not coming off. So you want to have it masked off like this. Then of course you need your disc. I'm doing this Eric Oakley Felon. You have to have premium plastic. You can't dye DX plastic or things like that. It won't take the dye. Next, you want to make sure to wash the disc off, especially if you've been throwing it or if it's been sitting around. I already did that. I scrubbed it with some warm water and soap, rinsed it off really well, dried it, so it should be ready to go. And also, you want to keep in mind that you want to dye a lighter colored disc because you can't dye a disc lighter than it already is. So if you start with a purple disc or something like that, it's going to be really hard to get a very good result. So you want something light where you can put some darker colors on it. And then also I have just a regular Frisbee I've been using for a long time. Works great. Something bigger than the disc. As you can see, I can set that in there and more than enough room. Then I've got my glue. I got this at Walmart. You can get it craft stores or online, wherever. Got a torch. You'll see what that's for later. It's for getting air bubbles out. Then I've got my little eyedropper, which I wish I had a few more of these, but I just have the one. Got a couple little tiny plastic containers to put dye in once I mix it up. And absolutely never store acetone mixed dye in a plastic container because acetone might, eat up the plastic and then you'll have a big mess. Then I just have this beer glass I got from a beer festival in Alaska, and I just kind of mix all my dyes up in there. Then of course your acetone, and then my little Schwizzle stick, which you can tell has been used. I mix the dye with this. I do my little swirly designs once I, have everything laid out. It's just a skewer. And then, of course, my Prochem dye, which always keep this stuff sealed up because it will get everywhere and it will never come off, like I said before. And today I'm using black, red, and blue. So, yeah, that's basically your setup. And next we'll move on to pouring our glue bed. So now I'm going to pour my clear glue bed. So I've got my big jug of glue. I've got my Frisbee right here. And you want to do this real slow. And I find the little center point in my Frisbee here. And that's where I start pouring. And like I said, just real slow. That will eliminate a lot of the air bubbles you will get. Just right in the center. And I'm going to fill this Frisbee up about halfway. Just steady, slow. Right about there. So we're done with our clear glue. And now I'm going to start looking for air bubbles. They're very tiny and they're very hard to spot, but they will royally screw up your die. And that's my weakness. I can't seem to get rid of all the air bubbles. But good thing to do, get your torch. And I see a few right here in the center. They're really small, so I'm just gonna go lightly over the top of those air bubbles with the torch. Really lightly. Knocked a few of them out of there. It's really difficult to get rid of all of them, but you want to do the best you can. Okay, so we've got our bed, and I'm just going to kind of let that sit for a couple minutes, and then we will move on to mixing our dye. So now we're going to mix our dye. I'm going to start with my black. So I've got my little container that I mix my dye in, and got a little measuring spoon here, and I do about 1/4 teaspoon, which is my smallest little measuring thing here. And again, be very careful when you handle this stuff. So I got a nice level 1/4 teaspoon. I'm gonna go ahead and drop that in there. And I'm gonna definitely keep this measuring spoon on the plastic. I don't want it on the countertop or anything. And I'm just gonna add some acetone here. About an ounce and a half or so. So half this glass is 2 ounces. So I've added my acetone. I'm gonna use my little Schwizzler. I'm just gonna stir it around. And you can't over mix it. You wanna mix it up really well. You really want the powder to incorporate into the liquid. You don't want excess powder. So I'm gonna mix that up really well. And I always keep paper towels handy when I'm done mixing here. I'm gonna wipe off my Schwizzler. Set it on the plastic here. And there we go, we got some black mixed up. So I'm gonna do this for all 3 of the colors. I'm gonna take my black, I'm gonna put it into one little container here, then my blue, then my red, and then we can move on to the fun part. So now we have our glue bed that's been sitting, kind of settling, evening out. Hopefully some of those air bubbles are rising to the top and popping. And I've mixed up my 3 colors of dye. I've got black and blue and red. Got my Schwizzle stick. Didn't make too much of a mess. And I'm gonna set those right next to my disc because I don't wanna be carrying dye from way over here. It's just a mess. So I'm gonna kind of get everything together here, and I'm just gonna let these dye mixtures sit for a little bit because there's always a little bit of excess powder that doesn't mix with the acetone, and you want that to kind of just settle to the bottom. So our next step is gonna be the fun part where you actually start laying down the dye. Okay, so this is the actual fun part. Now we're gonna start adding the liquid dye to our glue bed. And I've let this sit, like I said, for probably 10 minutes or so. That way all that sediment and all that powder is gonna settle to the bottom of these containers. hopefully. And I've got my eyedropper here. And what I'm going to do is find my center point. I can see through the clear glue the little dimple right in the center of the Frisbee here. And I'm going to start with red. So I'm just going to suck up a little red out of here. And what you want to do is suck it up off the top where there's less likely to be any sort of sediment or powder, because it should have sunk to the bottom. So I'm going to suck that up. Okay. And then I'm just going to start in the middle. I'm going to do a drop right there. And I like to keep it symmetrical, kind of geometric. So I'm going to go out to the edge, do another drop. Maybe over here, another drop. Over here. Over here. Over here. There we go. Looks pretty good. Grab a little bit more dye. And I used to just do one drop, but I have found that if you do a couple extra, you get much more vibrant results. So I'm going to kind of go in the same spot here. I'm just going to add another drop on this one. Keep it low. Less chance of it, going where you don't want to. Do some more red. Kind of let that spread out a little bit. You'll notice these little circles just kind of spread out. Do another drop of red. There we go. Getting some pretty nice little blobs there. And I apologize, but I'm going to be running to the sink because I only have the one eyedropper. So in between adding color, I have to kind of wash out the eyedropper, which is another tip. You want to just constantly be cleaning, wiping things, rinsing things off. Rinsed out my eyedropper. I'm going to grab some blue now. Whoops. Okay. Clear out my dropper there. Grab some blue. And again, just whatever pattern you want to do. It's, it's where you can be creative. So do a little drop of blue here. Right here, just kind of in between there. Add a few more there. And it doesn't look like much now, but couple more drops. And I gotta go rinse out my dropper again. Oh, another tip, always do this near a sink. So now I've got my black. Now I don't want a ton of black. I want to create ribbons of color. And what I like about the black is that it kind of separates those ribbons of color. So I'll just kind of very sparsely drop it in. Maybe a drop here. And I don't do much black. I'll do like a drop. Do one over here, one over here. Maybe a couple on the outside. In between those other little circles. And I don't want to use too much of these super dark colors because you don't want to camouflage your disc. I want it to be vibrant. I don't want it to be goth. You know what I mean? So I'm going to rinse out my dropper again. So you can see I've got a nice little pattern here. I'm just going to fill in a few of these little blank areas. I think the red's going to be really nice, so I'm going to grab a little bit more of that. I'm going to kind of do like right here, there's a blank spot, add a couple of drops of red. Maybe over here. Maybe back here. Rinse out my dropper. Grab some blue. A little bit here. A couple drops or so. Maybe here. Right there. And I'm going to kind of go over the old, the first blue spots I made because they're kind of looking a little weak. And just by adding a few extra drops, you get really vibrant colors. Okay. So I'm pretty stoked with that. So now I'm going to kind of let these drops kind of settle. They're going to kind of spread out, make little circles, and you let them sit, and they just kind of take form. And then the next part's the super fun part where you can actually make your design. Okay, so I've let this sit for, I don't know, 10 minutes or so. And now is the part where you can get really creative. So I grab my Schwizzle stick, and you always got to be aware of your center point. And you can just kind of go crazy here. Do whatever you want to do. Little swirls. You can do a big swirl like this. Kind of whatever you want. One thing I would say is don't over swirl. Because when you really overly mix these colors all together, they're going to turn out just a very bland, ugly, solid color. And you want to have ribbons of color. You want to have really defined swirls. So I like to just start in the center and just do kind of like a figure eight outward kind of a thing. And then go out to the edge, come back in to the center, a little bit out. And you truly can do whatever you want here. It's just getting some pretty nice little ribbons here. And you'll see as you're going, there'll be spots that are kind of oversaturated with a color, so you might want to mix those a little bit more. Got a splotch of black out here. I'm going to kind of mix in a little bit. Okay. And I don't want to over mix too much, so I'm probably just going to kind of keep it right about like that. And it doesn't look like much now, but then I'm going to take my Schwizzler out. Got my design. Oh, got a little bit of kind of a red splotch here. I'm going to balance out a little bit. Okay, little black over here. There we go. Okay. So kind of looking how I want it. So now you're going to grab your disc, and I like to just tuck my fingers into the corners here, and you don't want to just drop it straight in. You'll get air bubbles like crazy. So what you do is you kind of come in at a very slight angle. Again, look for your center point here in the middle of your Frisbee, center point in your disc. line it up the best you can. And just come in on the edge and just roll it gently down. And just let it ride. Now, the hardest part about dyeing a disc is waiting. So I'm going to give this a full 24 hours. I've done 8 hours, I've done 10 hours, 12 hours. It works. The best results a full day. So it's about, it's almost 9 o'clock. So tomorrow after work, I'll pull this guy out and we'll rinse it off and we'll see what we have. Just a side note here, especially if you live with other people or animals or whatever. So I'm going to take my little plastic bag and I'm just going to gently fold it over the top. Just so that bugs or, you know, whatever, don't fly in there. My cat doesn't want to step on it. And then I always put my little sign on it. Just so we're clear. Then we wait. See you tomorrow. Alrighty, it's been 24 hours. Just got home from work. And I'm going to uncover this. And I'll spare you the boring part where I take it out of the glue and scrub it and get all that glue off and stuff. So let's see how it turned out. Alrighty, I got it all cleaned up. Time for the big reveal. And here's what we ended up with. Looks pretty dope. Got some cool swirls, couple little splotches of black and stuff here and there. Overall though, looks pretty awesome. I'm stoked with it. And that's that. Thank you for watching.